Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome guys. Today's episode we are talking about how to avoid fatigue while you're hiking and trekking. Now the idea and inspiration behind today's episode was born from a weekend hike I went on with my girlfriend Ali. Now we were out hiking in preparation and training for a trek we have coming up in a couple of months, which is the Kokoda Trail, which is a big 96 kilometer track over in Papua New Guinea. And we were out on the trail, having an absolutely lovely day. We were walking along. It had just recently been really rainy in Sydney, so all the creeks and the waterfalls were all out in full force. We're having a really good time. But after a few hours, we started to hit that point where we were starting to get a little bit tired. And we started to get a little bit restless. And you know that stage when you start to count the kilometers down in your head. And in all honesty, you're thinking, I've had a really good time so far. If there was a point where I could finish off, I would be pretty happy. And this point usually coincides is when we're getting a little bit tired, and it's not something we really want to be in or a state we want to be in. Whether it's a day hike and we're just trying to enjoy ourselves and relax and take it easy and we're sort of not really in the moment and taking it in as much as we could, whether on a multi-day trek and again that fatigue, if that's going to be with you for multiple days on end, it's not going to be a good thing. Or even like a multi-month through hike, if you're doing that and you've got months and months ahead of you, it's more than likely if that happens a few times, you're going to start reconsidering your options. So fatigue and that sense of state of fatigue is something we really want to avoid on the trail. And today I'm just going to be talking about a few very simple tips that you can apply into both your training and your hiking, which can help delay this fatigue, prevent that happening, and just allow you to stay happy, to stay comfortable, and just really thoroughly enjoy yourself while you're on the trail, instead of getting to that stage where you're just counting down those kilometers. Now, the first thing, of the obvious answer here is the way to avoid fatigue is to just get more fit. And just to make sure you've trained and prepared beforehand and yada. And that's the obvious answer. That goes without saying, even though I just said it. So we're not going to dive into that today. Today, instead, we're going to get a little bit more specific into some very particular things you can be doing once you've trained and once you're on the trail. So to start off with, one of probably the most important point I'm going to make today is eat before you're hungry. Now, when you're hiking and trekking, you're burning through a whole bunch of extra calories and your body's churning through a whole bunch of fuel. And one really easy way to get tired too quickly is just to not eat. And like whether we're sort of only trying to stick to our 3 meals a day when on the trail, whether you're just not snacking while you're going on, whatever it is, we can get really hungry. And if we do get hungry, more than likely we're going to be tired, we're going to be a bit ratty, our mental clarity, our mental state's going to go down, and we're going to hit that fatigue state pretty quickly. So one of the best pieces of advice that I can offer you, and one of the best pieces of advice I ever took, was just make sure you're never reach that point of hunger or starvation. Well, obviously not starvation on the trail. So that means always having something to snack on in your pocket, whether it's in your literally in your pant pockets or in the little your hip belt in your pack, but whatever it is, just something to keep you going along. It really does make a massive difference. And then on top of that is trying to sit down for your meals before you get starving. So whether you have an endpoint set and you have like a particular point you're aiming for your lunch, if you are getting hungry before that, you are getting ratty, you are getting tired, maybe consider stopping before you actually get to that point and sitting down and eating. Because just a little bit of food can make a massive difference into your sense of physical exertion, your sense of enjoyment, your sense of fatigue, and just improve your physical performance overall. And we're not going to dive in too much in the details of what you should be eating, but just something that's tasty, something that's relatively nutrient dense, and that does do the job and gives you a little bit of energy moving forward. So point number 1, eat before you're hungry, and that is the single most important thing you're going to take away from this today. Number two is pretty similar to that, is drink before you're thirsty. Now, we've talked about previously in other podcasts that dehydration can significantly affect your physical performance. So it can reduce your aerobic capacity, it can reduce your strength output, it can reduce your time to exhaustion, which all basically means you're going to get tired a lot quicker if you are not hydrated. Now, there's big arguments out in the world whether thirst is a good indicator for hydration or not, but I like to say, look, a lot of people tend to learn how to ignore their thirst from day to day, whether or not that's you or not. But the safe way of doing it is just making sure you're constantly sipping on something, whether it's a hydration pack or whether it's your bottle, but never really let yourself get to that thirsty stage. Obviously, this doesn't mean just guzzling down liters of water at a time, because we talked about previously in the episode with Holly that hyponatremia is something we don't want to get to, but that's the extreme state, which we don't need to stress too much on this particular topic, but just be constantly sipping water as you go through. And again, that can really just preventing that dehydration can make a massive difference to your fatigue levels on the trail. Now, combining those two things, like we want to talk about electrolytes a little bit. Now, electrolyte supplements are absolutely fantastic for a whole bunch of different reasons, but one of the absolute no doubt, no question benefits of them is they can help prevent fatigue while you're exercising. So if you're doing things that are over 1 hour time, 1 hour of exercise at a time, such as hiking, electrolyte supplements, having some of that in you can prevent that state of fatigue. And it's also really, really convenient for you to sip on that while you're actually walking, as opposed to having to try to munch on some trail mix or munch on a muesli bar as you're walking, which might be a little bit tougher for some people. Now, a few things to look out for here. There's a million brands out there, and we're not going to dive into that. But a few things you want to be thinking about is, number one, it wants to have carbohydrates in it. Now, electrolytes in itself are going to be beneficial, but if you want to be getting the best benefits for fatigue prevention and improved performance, you want to have something that does have carbohydrates in it. So have a look through the ingredients, just make sure that has it. Number two, you want something with a relatively subtle flavor, in the sense that a lot of these things are super, super, super sweet. And if you're trying to drink them hour after hour after hour and day after day and even week after week potentially, it's going to be gross if you're getting one of those super sweet ones, unless you have the most insane sweet tooth in the world. So try a few out, find one that has a relatively subtle flavor, something that's not going to be overpowering, and something that you're pretty sure you're going to be able to drink for long periods of time. And number three, finally, is just test it out. Like, there's so many people that hop on, buy these awesome things, hop onto the trail for the first time and use them when they're off on their trek. And, it can cause a reasonable amount of gastric distress for some people. And, we don't want to be dealing with that while you're on the trail. So test it out at home, test it out on your training hikes, give it a whirl. But electrolyte supplements can be a really, really easy and simple thing which can prevent that fatigue state from setting in pretty early. Another thing relatively similar is coffee or caffeine is really, really good for preventing fatigue, improving performance. And if you do start to feel like that energy's flagging a little bit on the trail, having a quick coffee is absolutely amazing. So if you're doing your day hikes or whatever, carrying a thermos and just having your coffee in there, which you can have when you want, absolutely brilliant. Whether or not if you're just hiking along and you want to stop and boil water, that's a little bit of a hassle, but you can do that to make your coffee. Or alternatively, if you don't like coffee, or if you just want something a little bit quicker and more convenient, just caffeine pills are so simple. You can buy them at any chemist or any pharmacy, literally have a sip, pop it down, and you'll be laughing at about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So that can be a really, really effective way of just getting through those slumps, just preventing that stuff, preventing that fatigue setting in, and it's very, very beneficial. So that's enough about food. Moving on now is another tip for preventing fatigue is try to avoid getting yourself in a state of getting huffed and puffed. Now, when we go up hills, when we go upstairs, or just have a difficult section of the trail, quite often we sort of determine just to get through it, just to push through and get it done. And we start to get to this stage where we're huffing and puffing, we're gasping for air. And without getting into too much of the weeds of the science there, basically when you are getting huffed and puffed, you're working different energy systems in your body than you are usually when you're hiking. And while this isn't inherently bad, what it does do is these other energy systems do churn through your fuel sources relatively quickly. In particular, churn through your carbohydrate stores, which are very, very limited. And if you're doing this on a regular occurrence, on a long day's hike or multi days, it can just churn through your energy stores quite a little bit. So I usually recommend to people, if they are getting to that stage where oof, I'm getting a bit out of breath, just either slowing it down or having a break and just having a minute or two off halfway up a hill. Don't feel bad, don't feel like you need to push through it, but literally just pause there, catch your breath and go on again. Like this as a strategy is so effective for just keeping your enjoyment and your comfort levels up for long-term periods of hiking, and just really avoiding yourself churning through those energy stores and reaching that fatigue state. So never try to avoid as much as you can to get to that huff and puff stage. Now, the next point is one that's very interesting, which we haven't really ever heard talked about so much, but it is very interesting point in the sense that mental fatigue and mental stress can directly affect your physical fatigue. Meaning, if you have something whirling around in your head which is causing you problems, which you keep on turning over, it's causing you stress while you're hiking, or if you have a whole bunch of stuff that you just can't let go of in your head as you walking on the trail, that can actually physically prevent you from performing at your best, and it can make you tired earlier. And if we're trying to avoid this sense of fatigue, this is something to be really aware of. Now, this can be a whole bunch of different things, and like it could be literally anything under the sun, which is just causing you this mental strain or this mental stress. But a few points that I want to make today, which can probably help here, is number one, it's such a common sense recommendation, and you'd hope most people aren't doing this, but I know a whole bunch of people are, is number one, just don't check your emails while you're on the trail. Like 100%, whether you're day hiking, whether you're doing a multi-day trek or whatever, just stay off your emails if you're getting a whole bunch from work. They're not going to do you any good. Nothing's going to fall apart with you being gone for a few hours or a few days. Like, please don't check your emails. I usually recommend at least like having your phone off and put it in your bag and just keeping it off you can make such a massive difference. If you are using your phone for photography, at least have it on airplane mode, just so you're not getting notifications or anything popping in. Or at the very least, and if you do feel like you need to be in contact, if someone needs to call you, just turning off your notifications for your emails while you're on the trail. Like, this might not apply to many people, but there are going to be some people listening to this who do it. And 100%, if you're trying to perform on the trail, you're trying to enjoy yourself on the trail, you're trying to avoid fatigue on the trail, stay away from those emails. I cannot stress that enough. Another situation on this is if you have got a bit of stress going on, so whether you've just recently had an argument, you've got a stressful job situation, or just something that's going and turning around your head, we've all been there when we're on the trail and it just goes round and round and it never gets resolved, and we get ourselves worked up and stressed out and anxious about it. I had this the other day actually, and I had it in the gym, and it really absolutely knackered me mentally, and I'm sure it manifested physically as well. If you do have this, like, try to get it out of your head. So whether talk it through with a friend who you're hiking with, or what I absolutely love is just carry a pen and paper with you, sit down for 5 minutes and just journal, write out everything in your heads and just do a massive brain dump. Like, this might seem really simple to some, but it can make a massive difference for clearing your head. And not only is it an amazing stress reduction technique and mental clarity technique as in general life thing, but in this particular situation of avoiding fatigue, it can be so powerful and just allows you to sort of recenter yourself on the trail, clear all those distracting thoughts out, and just concentrate on what you're doing. And long term, that's going to be so powerful for your physical performance. So journaling, or at least having a conversation about whatever's turning in your head, can be very powerful. And then on top of this is the technique of abdominal breathing. Now, I've previously talked about abdominal breathing as one of my favorite things, and I always get my trekkers to do this and practice this if they go in altitude, because it's an absolutely fantastic way of breathing to relieve stress, to improve blood oxygenation, and a whole bunch of other things. But to prevent fatigue, it can be really good for a few reasons. Number one is it can sort of de-stress us a little bit and lower our heart rate a little bit. So if you are sort of had things turning around your head, or you're feeling stressed out, spending a few minutes on this can just sort of de-stress, reduce your body's tendency just to overthink and overwork, and it can really make a significant difference. It's also very good in the sense of just centering us a little bit, bringing us back into the moment so we can concentrate on the hiking. And sometimes when our head's just turning around and everything's like we can't concentrate on the exact moment, that fatigue just sets in. And even if you have reached a fatigue state and you are getting restless, spending a little bit of time on this can really just improve your energy a little bit and just drag you out of that hole. And it really is something I recommend to any hiker in this situation. Now, if you don't know what abdominal breathing is, it's dead simple. It's basically breathing when you're breathing in, as opposed to breathing into the chest and the shoulders, which we naturally tend to do when we're exercising, trying to breathe the air into your belly. So if you want to practice that now, you can literally put your hands on your belly. You're going to take a big breath in, and hopefully you can feel that belly expanding, and hopefully you don't feel too much in the chest and shoulders. And you're going to breathe in, and out, and just feel that belly going up and down. And breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, and doing that on the trail is really, really effective. Some people, it might take a little while to learn this, but like anything, it's a skill. If you practice it, it gets easier. And the more you can apply this to your training and your hiking, it's going to be incredibly beneficial in a whole bunch of different ways. But 100%, that's a really good way of digging yourself out of a hole and avoiding that mental fatigue, which can turn into physical fatigue. And then finally, not so much around training or anything, but this is probably all common sense, but stuff might as well say is just have a bit of fun on the trail. If you are feeling like you're getting to that stage where you're restless, you're struggling, you're getting a bit tired, just have a bit of fun. Sing a song, do a bit of skipping down a straight bit of the trail, stir your friend up if you're hiking, tease them about something. Just get a little bit of fun going. It doesn't always have to be serious hiking. It doesn't always have to be quiet. And sometimes these little things can just distract us, reset our mind, and just get us out of that hole, make us feel a whole bunch better. And even just literally singing one song can get you 2 hours more worth of hiking, feeling good and feeling physical. There's nothing scientific about it. There's nothing too secretive or nothing you may have heard before, but it's worth mentioning. So that's about it from today. A few very, very specific points to go around this whole avoiding fatigue subject. If you do have any questions about this, please, as always, do send me an email at rowan.summit@summitstrength.com.au. I'm always more than happy to answer any of your questions around this stuff. If you have enjoyed this podcast and you have been enjoying the content I've been putting out, I would really, really appreciate it if you left me a review on iTunes. It really does go a long way to help me grow in this podcast, and I've got big plans for it in the future, so I'd really, really appreciate it. But that's enough from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.